Hello, and welcome to episode 41 of Prog Review. And this time I'm going to be talking about a record that was out quite recently. Today's date is the 6th of February, so it would have been out last week. So it's quite a current release, and some of you may not consider this prog, but you know, hey, too bad. I bought it, I listened to it, I consider it worthy of your consideration. Yes, if you've read the description or looked at the titles, I am indeed talking about Portico Quartet and their latest record. Now, I can't remember how I got introduced to the band. I think it came via recommendation on the eMusic website. You know, you search for things and they make suggestions for you. I think I was searching for an album by a band called Polar Bear. Check those out as well. Got a very interesting drummer, and I think Portico Quartet came up, and I checked them out. And such is the symbiotic relationship of music and eMusic, it kind of led one into the other. But you know, what's to say about Portico Quartet? The band's MO is, that's modus operandi for those of you who are not familiar with that kind of thing. Is there a kind of a progressive jazz outfit, but they fuse progressive elements such as world music into a jazz sensibility. And the world music for Portico Quartet comes infused via their heavy use of an instrument called the hang drum, which looks like an upside down UFO or two Chinese woks welded together. They can be played with your fingers or via or sticks or mallets or whatever, and it sounds it has a very similar timbre to a steel drum. And you know, it sounds a bit like a gamelan, a small gamelan effect. Anyway, Portico Quartet have used the instrument heavily on the previous two albums, but have moved in a different direction for this recording. This, of course, is the band's third album, and it is, like the previous records that's gone before, largely instrumental affair, except for one track which features a vocal, but I'll talk about that later. The opening track, Window Seat, automatically plants a big signpost in the ground, detailing the band's change of direction, and the sign is writ large with the word electronica. Don't be afraid, it's still valid as a prog review. It's not a bad thing, them going into like the electronic arena, and I was surprised just how much the band used loops in their live set when I saw them performing in early 2011 when they supported the revitalised Penguin Cafe. The opening track is can be described as a sound sculpture, and it eases you into the album. It's full of strings and atmospheric clicks and pops and drones, and this leads you into more familiar territory with the song Ruins. And in this time around, the hang drum doesn't lead the music. It might kind of adds support. It's more of a supporting instrument in the background, and there's some great bass work and some beats there holding the song together. And when the saxophone comes in, the band is essentially a drummer, upright bass player, hang drummer, and saxophonist. Brain fart time. So you can imagine it's that kind of quartet. And when the saxophone comes in this instance, the song, you know, begins to fly. It transforms itself into something else, and it's a bit like here comes the poet. It's a bit like watching a bud unfold into a flower. And when you get towards the end of the song, there's some really good honking on the sax, which wouldn't be amiss on a Van de Graaff Generator album. You see, that's how I kind of link these guys to the prog movement. You do hear some tones that would, you know, sound familiar from other records. Then we get into a track called Spinner, and that does away with the hang drum completely, and the addition of the electronic percussion and loops certainly adds an extra dimension to musical landscape. Again, it's another piece that soars with the amazing sax playing. And then the third track, Rubidium, it takes more of a minimalistic approach, and the gamelan light sound of the hang drum returns, and this time it's backed by bowed bass and electronic atmospherics. And then there are these bleeps and bloops and this sense of constant forward motion. In places it reminds me of early period Tortoise. That's Tortoise the band and not Tortoise the animal. So look those guys up as well, especially the album TNT, and that's an Order Soldier. Yeah. This is all followed up by a short track called Export for Hot Climates, and here we see the band just laying down a piano groove, and it's very melancholic, and it's only 1 minute 10 seconds, and it doesn't really establish itself. You see, it's, for me it feels like it's got the seed of a good idea, but it just peters out. It's a real shame, because I think they may have been about to build on it, or done something more with it. It's like there's a promise there which is snatched away at the end. And then there comes more beats and loops, and we're returned out to the chilled future lounge juju space jazz that the band pedals with the song Lacquer Boo. And by now you realise that this album isn't about melody and about songs per se, it's more about atmospherics and moments. It's abstract, it's a watercolour painting dissolving in the rain, but all the time it's underpinned by the beat of a drum machine. It's not a bad thing, but I'll come to my reasons for my reservations towards the end of this review, so bear with me. Steepless for me is the weakest track on the album because it features a vocal, and the vocal, again, for me, just my opinion, I'm probably wrong, it sounds incredibly dated and out of place with the rest of the record. I can understand that the band want to try and do something different, but there's good different and there's bad different, and this falls between two stools, kind of lolloping towards the bad. And then we're transported away once again with another mellow soundtrack dominated by the sax, which for me, again, just me, is completely ruined by some really naff electronic treatments. Less is more, boys. Remember that. Naughty, naughty. The beats return for City of Glass, and the minimalist bass line is put over some scattered beats, and it's quite tantalising. I really was getting into this. It's quite minimalistic, and then the sax returns and we're off and we're running again. However, the song unfortunately doesn't really end up going anywhere, but it's a nice track, but the lack of melody and real form and the reliance of electronic beats, it's beginning to wear me out at this point. And then the album is rounded off by Trace, which is another sound sculpture piece which doesn't really do much other than book on the album, really. So you have two sound sculptures at either end, and that's their purpose, just to sit there. Now that's great if you bought the CD or you've downloaded it free music or a number of these other download sites. But if you want more Portico Quartet for your buck, then you better head over to iTunes, where you get 3 extra tracks. Train to Montauk should have probably been on the album. It sounds like it could have been an album track, but unfortunately is let down by some more awful electronic effects, which in my opinion are misguided. Vital is another short sound sculpture piece which is inconsequential and sounds a bit like Frippanino. And then at the end there's a demo version of City of Glass, which is okay. Now, I love Portico Quartet, and I think their first 2 albums, Knee Deep in the North Sea and Isla, are absolutely brilliant. I think they really are really good works and worth checking out. Unfortunately, this album has tried to move more away from that sensitive and melodic side. Playing those albums, and they've kind of charted their boat towards electronic waters, and by doing that, they've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Their knack of melding melody with the hang drum and the saxophone and this cool jazz feel, was kind of their style, and it's gone now. I admire what they've tried to do by being experimental with this album. They get kudos points for that, but in places it feels a bit lacking for me. And standing on its own, it's a good record. It's an interesting recording because they're being progressive with what they do. But put back to back with the previous 2 albums, the cracks begin to show. And for that reason, I'm going to give this a sensible 3 Subos out of 5. That's 3 Subos out of 5. But, don't write them off because of this review. They are definitely worth checking out. Definitely check out the first 2 records. And if you catch them live, I guarantee you will be transported away by the power of some genuinely progressive and moving music. So that's that. My name's been Darren Locke. I've been blathering on about Portico Quartet's self-titled album, and you have been very patient listening to this sad old face flapping his lips. There's only one more thing to say, and that's prog on.